Hello everyone, and welcome to the Biblical Bookworm. My name is Elizabeth, and today I'll be talking about the book Go Bravely, Becoming the Woman You Were Created to Be, which was published in 2018 by Emily Wilson Hussem, also known as Emily Wilson, because that's the name of her YouTube channel. As you've probably read in the title of this video, this book was the first good book I read on the topic of Christian femininity, or the first not awkward book. I'll explain what I mean by that throughout the video, but I think that one reason why the book is not awkward is because it was written by Emily Wilson. And if you know Emily Wilson, so if you know her personality, she's confident, energetic, she knows what she wants while always keeping Christian morality and Christian principles in mind. In my video about books by Catholic YouTubers, I said that I didn't understand why the book is so specifically marketed for women, because in my opinion, most of the content is applicable to everyone, because the book actually just describes how to be a Christian or specifically a Catholic in the 21st century. Please don't get me wrong, I don't say that the marketing was bad, I'm just not sure if it was necessary. And maybe that was also a reason why I liked this book and why I didn't find it to be awkward, because its content is applicable to every human. My issue with other books or videos on the topic is that they seem to assume that all women have stereotypically feminine talents and interests, which is just not true, and so their content is not applicable to every woman. Go Bravely focuses on dealing with the difficulties that can come with living a Christian life and trying to become a saint. And in the book, the author talks about dating, chastity, friendships and family, showing your faith publicly, and self-love. By the way, while preparing this video, I found out that the title of the book was inspired by a quote by St. Joan of Arc, who said, "Go forward bravely. All will be well, have no fear." So now I will summarize the parts I found most interesting. So I will talk about bravery, identity, social life, and at the end of the video, also dating and chastity. First, she starts her book by explaining what going bravely means. And here she talks about her own examples. For example, where she was a college student, and as a college student, she struggled with having the courage to go to the church on campus because very few people went there, and it was very noticeable when she went there. That's also something I really liked about the book, because she showed her vulnerable side and made herself more relatable to the reader. Then she said something that really stuck with me, namely that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the ability to conquer our fears and to choose to do the right thing regardless of whether we are afraid or not. I found that very inspiring. So you see, the goal is not to somehow eliminate fear, because that's not always possible, but to act in spite of it. Mrs. Wilson also reminds us that becoming a saint doesn't mean that you have to pray all the time or that you can't enjoy your life. As St. John Bosco once said, you can have much fun without offending God. Throughout her book, she also reminds us of who we are, and she explains that we are primarily children of God, or in this specific context, she wrote daughters of God. And she said that we tend to forget that, and instead we often define ourselves by our state of life. So we say that we're a daughter, a wife, a mother, or a nun, or we define ourselves by our profession. But first and foremost, we are children of God. She also explains that God loves you because you are, and that all you have to do to be loved is to exist. Then there is a chapter which is called Depend on Him, and that's another example for why I like this book and why I like Emily Wilson in general, because my first thought when reading the title of the chapter was that Depend on Him refers to a man, because that's what I would expect to hear from a book on Christian femininity. I'm not saying that women are completely independent of men. There's definitely mutual dependence, but I just like the focus of the book. She focuses on being a child or a daughter of God and not a wife. In short, the chapter explains how we are strongest when we are totally dependent on God. The author also touches upon how to treat other women, and she explains that competition makes athletes better athletes, but not women better women, and that women should support each other. She warns us that insecurities make us treat other women poorly, and that they stem from the lack of belief in who we are. And I'm not sure if she said that, or maybe Jackie Angel or someone else, but the fact that someone else is beautiful, smart, or funny doesn't make you less beautiful, smart, or funny. Then there's a chapter called Honor honor those who love you most, which I found to be very beautiful because there Mrs. Wilson encourages us to spend time with the people who love us most. So that would be, for example, parents, because she explains that that way we show them that we care about them. In the chapter, she also wrote a heart-wrenching sentence, namely that the capacity of a child to hurt their parents is beyond our capacity to understand unless we have kids ourselves. Mrs. Wilson explains that in order to love others, you have to love yourself first. So she gives some advice on how to accomplish that. One of her suggestions is to make positive affirmations in front of a mirror and to find 3 things you love about yourself. She also briefly touches upon the topic of body image, where she advises us to view food as nutrition and exercise as self-care. And she reminds us that food doesn't add something to our body that we then have to get rid of by exercising. If you're interested to learn more on that topic, so on the topic of body image, check out my video about the book Improving Your Body Image Through Catholic Teaching. In the chapter about dating, Mrs. Wilson advocates for dating with purpose. She advises the reader to ask herself why you want to date. Do you want to date because you want to grow in virtue and because you want to find out what qualities you want in a husband? Or is it because it makes you feel good or it helps you fit in? I mentioned in my video about Catholic Match that Emily Wilson said in one of her videos that it's a bad idea to use dating apps to boost your self-esteem and to test how attractive you are, because that, quote, will end in a disaster. For people who already are in a relationship, she gives the advice to ask oneself whether your partner brings you closer to God or whether he brings you farther away. And then I'd also like to mention what Jackie Angel recently said on an episode with Matt Fred, because she said that she would rather be single and happy in Jesus than miserable in marriage. And on that episode, Mrs. Angel also pointed out that it's a myth that marriage makes everything better. Back then, Matt Fred and Jackie Angel agreed that in marriage everything gets amplified and things get exposed rather than miraculously being cured, and marriage definitely doesn't just make all your problems disappear. As Mrs. Angel said, marriage should be a foretaste of heaven, but it can be a foretaste of hell. Another really interesting thing that Mrs. Angel said on that episode was that a priest once told her that there are 3 types of priests. Those that are called by God, those that are called by themselves, and those that are called by the devil. And she said that the same is probably true for marriage, meaning that some people are called by God to marriage, some call themselves, and some are called by the devil. The last chapter that I'd like to summarize today was the chapter on chastity, where Mrs. Wilson said that failing doesn't make you a failure, and that we should use failures as opportunities to grow from them. As far as I remember, she also mentions that it's never too late to decide to save sex for marriage, meaning that also people who are not virgins anymore can decide to wait for marriage from this moment forward. She also writes that a guy that turns you down because of the fact that you want to save sex for marriage actually does you a favor, and that saving sex for marriage gives you the assurance that your spouse loves you because of who you are and not because of what you can do. Now let's get to my opinion on the book. In total, I would give it an 8 out of 10, and what I liked about it was that it was written in an encouraging way, because Mrs. Wilson doesn't focus on pointing out what you're doing wrong, but she shows you ways how to do things right, how to live your life as a Christian in the best way possible. The book is also beginner friendly, and I'd say it's an easy read. So if you're not reading that many spiritual books, I definitely recommend this book, because I think that it's a good introduction into spiritual reading. That's been it for today. See you next week. God bless and bye!